Hey guys, tonight we step into the quiet hum of a third-floor apartment where the walls are thin, the nights are long, and something strange waits just beyond the edge of your vision. A place where dreams bleed into waking hours, and a shadow with a dented head watches from the corner of the room. The floors creak when no one's walking. The air buzzes with a low electricity that never stops. And every so often, something scratches at the window, even though it's 3 stories up. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It started as most things do in silence. The apartment was small, half-furnished walls scuffed from old tenants, a couch by the window, a desk tucked against the far wall, one plant in the corner that was already beginning to die. It wasn't a special place, not in the way people romanticize city apartments, but it was his. Adam had just moved in a few boxes, still unpacked coffee mugs, without a cabinet to live in stacks of books forming makeshift shelves along the floor. Outside, the night pressed gently against the windows, traffic in the distance. A dog barked once, then nothing. Adam was used to quiet, preferred it. After a decade of roommates, shared leases, and overheard arguments through thin drywall, he was finally alone. A space to breathe, think, work. He had an old armchair by the window, worn blue fabric, one of the arms unraveling at the seam. He liked to sit there in the evening sketchbook balanced on his knees, headphones on but no music playing. Just silence. A ritual. He'd listen to the apartment settle, the radiator knocking, the buzz of the fridge, the occasional drip from the faucet that no one could seem to fix. The first few nights passed uneventfully, but on the 5th night something shifted. He woke at 2:41 a.m., sharp, like a switch flipped in his brain. No sound had stirred him, no dream, just open eyes and darkness and a pulse in his ears. He blinked. The apartment was quiet, still lit faintly by the street lamp outside. Pale orange light filtered through the blinds in tight lines across the walls. Everything looked the same, familiar, except there was something in the corner, not directly in the light. Not in the shadow either. A shape, small, low to the ground. Still, Adam squinted eyes adjusting. It looked like a boy, sitting cross-legged in the far corner between the bookshelf and the radiator. But his head hung to one side too far, and in the glow of the streetlight, Adam could just make out the outline of his skull, sunken on one side, as if part of it had been caved in. He sat up slowly. The figure didn't move. He blinked. Gone. The room was empty again. He told himself it had been a trick of the light, a fragment of dream lingering after waking. Maybe the plant had shifted. Maybe his coat, draped on the chair, had bent just the right way to create a face where there wasn't one. He didn't sleep much after that. The next night passed without incident, but the following morning something odd happened. The plant in the corner, already wilting, had fallen over. Not tipped, gently, knocked flat. Soil scattered across the floor pot cracked. Adam stared at it, unsure whether he'd bumped it the night before. But the trail of soil was strange thin lines arcing from the window, like fingers had dragged through the dirt. He cleaned it up, replanted what he could. Didn't think too hard. That night he dreamt of the boy. He was standing this time. Not in the corner, but by the foot of the bed. Silent. His head still hung to one side, face obscured by dark hair. When Adam tried to speak, the boy lifted his arm and pointed toward the window. Adam woke, gasping. The blinds were gently swaying, but the window was shut. He got up and checked every lock, every latch. Nothing disturbed. But the air felt wrong, charged like the moments before a storm. He tried to work that day. Sketched absent-mindedly, checked his phone too often. The hours crawled. At dusk, He moved the armchair away from the corner, repositioned the bookshelf, lit a candle on the windowsill. He left the lamp on when he went to bed. At 3:12 a.m., he woke again. The boy was back, sitting, same place, same posture. But this time his head turned, not all the way, just enough for Adam to see one eye staring back through the hair, wide, unblinking, and impossibly hollow. The eye didn't blink. It just watched, still and dark and impossibly round. Adam didn't move. His breath slowed. He wasn't sure if he was even awake. His body felt detached, half floating like the space between sleep and panic. But his chest was heavy, and something in his gut told him he was not dreaming. The figure didn't shift, didn't breathe, but the air around it moved subtly, like heat distortion rising off pavement. Adam kept his eyes open until they burned. And then, without transition, he woke again. Morning light, room empty. The corner was bare, no figure, no signs. But the floor beneath the bookshelf was different now, darker like the boards had been soaked. He checked for leaks. Nothing. When he ran his fingers across the wood, it felt cold and slightly damp, like something had been sitting there for a very long time. He pushed the bookshelf back. That evening, Adam typed a short post online, not mentioning much, just asking if anyone had experienced sleep paralysis lately. He didn't explain the boy. Not yet. A few strangers replied with vague comments, but one response stood out. It was short. Just a question. Did you ask him 2 questions? He stared at it, confused. He clicked on the account. Anonymous. Blank profile. No posts. No followers. Adam responded. What are you talking about? No reply. The comment was gone within an hour. That night he couldn't sleep. He stayed up on the couch, scrolling his phone, the TV murmuring something soft in the background. Around 2:45 a.m., he heard the radiator click, then hiss. A few seconds later, the overhead light in the hallway blinked. Not once, twice. He stood heart racing. Walked toward the door, leaned out, checked the hall. Empty. He turned back toward the living room and froze. There, sitting in the armchair where Adam usually worked, was the boy. Same posture, legs crossed, arms slack at his sides, hair falling just low enough to obscure most of his face, but the dent in his skull was clearer now. A sharp collapse on the left side just above the ear like the bone had folded in. Not fresh, not bloody. Old. Adam didn't breathe, he just stared. The boy lifted his head slightly, and this time he spoke. The voice was dry, barely audible, like wind through broken glass. You get to ask me 2 questions, he said. If you ask a third, I'll come back. Adam stood there, thoughts scrambling. He didn't ask anything. He blinked. The chair was empty. He didn't sleep. At dawn, he sat on the fire escape, smoking a cigarette he'd forgotten he still had from the move. The city stirred around him, soft and slow. Cars, distant horns, life returning. He listened for the voice, for the hum, for anything out of place. Nothing, but the boy's words echoed in his mind. 2 questions. A third, and he returns. Returns from where? Returns to do what? Adam didn't ask. Not yet. He opened his sketchbook and began to draw the boy. From memory, every line, every dent, every shadow behind the hair. As he sketched, the room grew cold, and from behind him the hallway light blinked twice. The hallway light clicked off entirely. Adam sat frozen on the floor, pencil in hand, still angled over the sketchbook. The outline of the boy stared back at him, unfinished, only one eye shaded in, but it already felt too real. He closed the book slowly, placed it face down. The room hadn't gone dark exactly, but the shadows felt thicker now. Not longer, just denser, like they had gained weight. He stood, stepped quietly toward the hallway, and reached for the switch. The bulb flickered once, then buzzed to life. Harsh yellow light spilled out over the floor. Normal again, but the silence behind him had shape. He turned. Nothing there. Still, he walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, stared at its contents without purpose. The the hum of the apartment returned subtle and steady. The light in the hallway stayed on. He poured a glass of water with trembling hands, drank slowly, focused on each swallow, tried to ground himself in the ordinary. The next morning, he called in sick. He sat by the window with his coffee, the curtains drawn back just enough to let sunlight splash across the table. The sketchbook sat nearby untouched. He didn't want to open it. Not yet. He left the apartment around noon and walked. No direction, just motion. He ended up at a small bookstore and browsed aimlessly until something caught his eye. A slim, weathered volume tucked between two oversized art books. It didn't have a title on the spine, just a faded navy cover with a single embossed eye on the front. He opened it. No table of contents, just fragments, stories, journal entries, some typed, some handwritten. One page had been dog-eared. He turned to it. At the top, "Dear David." His heart stopped. The entry was short, only a few lines. He comes in threes. First as a shadow, then as a dream, then as a choice. Ask 2 questions and walk away. Ask a third, and he stays. Forever. Adam shut the book. His hands were cold. He bought it, didn't wait for a bag, and walked home with it clutched to his chest. When he got back, the hallway light was on again, even though he hadn't flipped the switch. That night, he left every light in the apartment on. At 3:00 a.m., he heard a sound from the corner, a soft, dragging shuffle. He sat up in bed. The boy stood at the foot again, still, watching. Adam's mouth was dry, but he managed to speak. One question. He chose carefully. "Who are you?" The boy tilted his head, the dent in his skull caving deeper in the motion. "I was hurt," he said. "Left behind." His voice sounded far away, like it passed through walls to reach Adam's ears. Adam exhaled. His chest tightened. He didn't know what to say. He only had one question left, and the third would bring him back. The boy didn't move, didn't breathe. And then, just as suddenly as he appeared, he vanished. The room felt colder after he left, the air thinner, the silence deeper. Adam lay back down, one question asked, one more aloud. He didn't sleep, but the sketchbook remained shut on the floor, and the shadow in the corner felt just a little darker. The next day passed like a dream, half remembered. Adam barely spoke, barely ate. He avoided the sketchbook, avoided the hallway. He sat at his desk, but didn't draw. Instead, he flipped through the blue journal from the bookstore, scanning every page for more mentions of David. Most of the entries were strange, scribbled notes, bits of poetry, fragmented thoughts about a boy who knocked 3 times a boy, who answered questions with lies wrapped in truths. One line caught his attention, written in jagged pen. He waits in corners because he was left in one. Adam stared at it for a long time. The quiet in the apartment had a pulse now. The lights flickered randomly. He kept the hallway bulb unscrewed. It didn't help. By nightfall, he set up a small camera in the living room, just his phone propped against a book aimed at the armchair. He didn't expect anything. It was just something to do, something to make the fear feel more practical, less abstract. A task. At 3:03 a.m., he woke again. Not startled, just aware, like his body already knew something waited. He turned his head slowly. The boy sat in the chair, hands folded in his lap legs, dangling off the edge. His eyes were barely visible beneath the curtain of dark hair, but they were there, watching, waiting. Adam's throat tightened. He whispered almost without thinking, "What happened to you?" The boy blinked slowly. "He pushed me," he said, "down the stairs." Adam felt a cold wave move through his limbs. He hadn't expected an answer. The boy looked smaller now, fragile, but the dent in his skull remained. The boy didn't fade this time. He just stared. After a while, he turned his head toward the corner and vanished like smoke. Adam lay there, heart pounding. That was 2. He couldn't ask again. Not ever. In the morning, Adam checked the camera. The recording stopped at 3:01 a.m. Not corrupted, not deleted, just blank from that moment on. He didn't touch the camera again. That afternoon, someone knocked on the apartment door 3 times. Adam didn't answer. The knocks didn't come again. But when he checked the hallway through the peephole, there was a shadow leaning against the far wall. Not a person, just a silhouette, dark, formless, and still. He stepped back and locked every bolt on the door. That night, the boy didn't come, but the corner felt full, like something was waiting to be invited in. Adam stayed awake until sunrise, not because he chose to, but because sleep refused to come. Every time his eyes fluttered shut, he felt it, the quiet stretch of space in the far corner tightening, thickening. A gravity, like something pressing gently against the air. The boy didn't appear that night, but the apartment felt off balance, like a room that had shifted imperceptibly on its foundation. He moved through the day, like a ghost skipping work again, brushing his teeth with the water still running, standing in the shower longer than he realized, waiting for the weight in his chest to lift. It didn't. At noon, he walked down to the building's lobby and asked the manager if anyone had died in the unit. The man looked at him, shrugged, and said, "Wouldn't surprise me. 3rd floor's always been weird. That apartment never stays full long." Adam nodded, didn't press further. On the way back upstairs, he noticed a dark smear on the stairwell wall about waist height, like something had been dragged. His fingers itched to reach out and touch it. He didn't. That evening, he tried to distract himself with noise. He turned on the TV, left a podcast playing, even ran the kitchen faucet for a while just to have sound in the room. But under it all, the silence waited. By 2 a.m., it was unbearable. He turned everything off, sat in the armchair, and stared directly at the corner. If the boy was going to appear, he wanted to see it. He wanted it to stop sneaking up, stop tiptoeing around him like a dream he couldn't wake from. He whispered, not loud, but firm, "I'm not asking again." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the shadows in the corner shifted, curling inward, like smoke pulled by a breeze. And there he was, David, legs tucked beneath him, hands flat on the floor, head slightly tilted. But this time, he wasn't looking at Adam. He was looking behind him. Adam's skin went cold. He turned his head slowly. Nothing, just the hallway stretching out in low light. But David's eyes didn't move, still fixed on the empty space behind Adam. A deep, unsettling stillness settled over the room. Adam spoke quietly. "If I don't ask, do you go away?" David didn't answer. His mouth didn't move, but Adam heard the voice again, deep and steady, as if it came from the walls themselves. "I stay if I'm seen. I feed on the 3rd. The words weren't angry, but they weren't kind either. They carried weight, the finality of something old and practiced. Adam sat very still. He tried not to think of the unanswered door knock. He tried not to think of the journal upstairs or the way the hallway light would flicker twice before going out. Instead, he focused on David's small frame, the unnatural tilt of his neck, the black void where the dent cut across his temple like a forgotten crater. "I see you," Adam said at last. Not a question, a fact. David blinked. The shadow around him thickened. Then he vanished again, not with a flicker, but with a slow unraveling like fabric being pulled apart, one thread at a time. And this time when he left, something else remained. A small toy sat in the corner now, a red wooden car. Adam had never seen it before. When he picked it up, it was warm to the touch. That night he didn't sleep. Not because of fear, but because something had changed. The boy was no longer asking to be acknowledged. He had been. And now he was leaving pieces of himself behind. Small tokens, anchors. Adam placed the toy on the shelf beside the plant. It sat there like it belonged, And when the radiator hissed again, Adam didn't flinch, because he knew now David wasn't the only thing in the room. By the following night, Adam had given up pretending his life was normal. He no longer made coffee in the mornings, no longer checked his emails or returned calls. His world had shrunk to the thin perimeter of his apartment, and within it, the corner had become its own gravitational field, pulling his gaze, stealing his focus, demanding attention even when it was empty. The red toy car remained exactly where he left it on the shelf, but now it was joined by something else, a small marble, perfectly smooth pale blue with a swirling white core. He found it on the kitchen counter right beside his keys. No memory of how it got there. He hadn't had a marble since childhood. He held it up to the light, watched it catch the glow of the bulb, and a shiver ran up his spine when he realized he could see a faint fingerprint on its surface. Not his. He set it beside the car. 2 artifacts now. 2 offerings. He didn't know what they meant, whether they were gifts, warnings, or some strange attempt at communication. But the air in the room had changed. The silence wasn't just quiet anymore. It was full-textured, the kind of quiet that listens back. That night, Adam sat cross-legged in the center of the living room floor, facing the corner directly. He placed the toy car and marble between them as if laying out pieces on a board. The light overhead buzzed softly, dimming at uneven intervals. His phone was off, his laptop closed. He had nothing but the ticking of the old clock in the hall and the quiet hum of his breath. Then, without warning, the corner grew darker, not like a light had been turned off, but like a shadow had slid into place from the inside. And in the center of that shadow, David appeared again. His form took shape in pieces, first the curve of a shoulder, then the messy tangle of dark hair, then the long-fingered hands resting on the floor. The dent in his skull was deeper tonight, almost sunken, casting a strange curve to his silhouette. His mouth didn't move, but Adam heard the voice anyway. "He's coming," Adam swallowed hard. Who, he asked instinctively, then immediately froze. That had been a third question. David lifted his head slowly. His face remained in shadow, but Adam could feel the weight of his stare like pressure against the front of his skull. The temperature in the room dropped. The air turned dense, and in the space between heartbeats, Adam felt the walls breathe inward, not physically, but in some deeper, older way, as though the room itself had heard the question and responded. David didn't disappear this time. He stood. He took a single step forward. Adam didn't move, couldn't move. His limbs were heavy, as if the air had thickened around his joints. The boy raised one hand, pointed to the hallway. Then from the far end of the apartment, something creaked. Not the usual groan of pipes or settling wood. This was slow, deliberate. Footsteps, one after another, dragging. Adam turned his head toward the hall, just as the light bulb above flickered violently and burst with a soft pop. Glass rained down in a dull sparkle, and darkness swept over the room. But even in that darkness, Adam could see the hallway clearly in his mind, see the shape at the far end of it. A taller figure, broad, uneven. Its arms hung too long, its neck slightly cocked, like it couldn't quite hold its own head straight. It moved with jerks like a puppet with tangled strings. And as it stepped closer, he could hear it breathing wet, raspy and deep, like wind dragging through a throat full of water. Adam scrambled backward, his spine pressed against the baseboard. David remained in the corner, still watching unmoving. He was not afraid. Not of this. Adam understood with the sudden clarity of a nightmare that David wasn't the thing that haunted the apartment. He was its echo, its scar. The true presence was this new figure, the one who had pushed him, the one who had fed on the third question. The figure was halfway down the hall now. Adam could make out parts of it in the flickering hallway light. torn trousers, one bare foot, hands that scraped along the walls with nails blackened like they'd been left in the dirt too long. The air grew heavier with each step. Adam's lungs burned. His body screamed to move but didn't obey. He reached blindly for anything, his phone, a lamp, the toy car, but the shadows had crept across the floor like water soaking into everything. And then just as the figure reached the edge of the room, right before it would have stepped fully into the light, David moved. He lifted one hand and whispered something Adam couldn't hear, and the light snapped back on. The hallway was empty. The room was silent, but the marble was gone, and Adam knew in that terrible quiet that the third question had been answered. Not with words, but with a door now opened. The apartment didn't feel like his anymore. The layout remained the same. The scuffed wood floors, the humming fridge, the dusty books stacked in uneven towers. But something deeper had shifted. The air had grown older, like it belonged to a place buried beneath decades instead of sitting 3 floors above a deli. The walls seemed to listen more now, holding their breath until he made a sound. Adam moved through the space carefully, deliberately, like a guest trying not to disturb a sleeping host. He no longer turned off the lights, but they dimmed on their own. He no longer locked the windows, but they no longer opened. The red toy car remained on the shelf untouched, but the marble, David's marble, was gone, and in its place sat a single crumpled page torn from the blue journal. Adam didn't remember bringing the journal downstairs. He hadn't even opened it in 2 days. But now this torn scrap rested on his kitchen counter, curled slightly like it had been gripped in a tight, cold fist. He smoothed it out with trembling fingers. He doesn't knock. He drags. He waits in walls. If you hear the nails, you're already too late. David isn't his ghost. David is his anchor. Adam sat down hard on the kitchen stool, reading the words over and over. David was never the danger. He was the signal, the warning that something older and hungrier had slipped through. The figure in the hallway, the puppet man, wasn't bound by rules or questions. He had no game. He was consequence. And now Adam had opened the door. That night, sleep didn't come. Instead, Adam sat in bed, back pressed to the wall, the hallway light burning in sharp amber. Hours passed. 1 ma, 2 ah. At 2:47, the radiator hissed again, but the sound wasn't quite right. Not air, not steam. A whisper of nails against metal. Slow, scraping, pulling. He held his breath. From the vent near the floor, a shape moved. Thin fingers pressed outward from behind the grate. 5 digits, no skin, just something like flesh that had dried and cracked, wriggling forward. Then they retracted, silent, gone. The grate was still closed, but Adam knew the thing had found a way in, not through the door, through the house itself, through its breathing bones. At 3:12, the hallway light began to flicker, not randomly, but in a pattern. 2 short bursts, 1 long, 2 short. He recognized the rhythm, though he didn't know how. A signal. A knock without a knock. And then the voice came, not David's. This one was deeper, gravel-coated, and impossibly slow, like rock grinding against itself in an empty canyon. It didn't speak in words. It groaned syllables that didn't belong to any language he knew. Yet Adam understood all the same. I have been let in. Adam felt the words echo in his spine like a second heartbeat. He sat frozen, throat dry, staring at the corner across from the bed. David wasn't there. The space was empty, but not silent. Something breathed behind the drywall now, not fast, not human, and it knew his name. Adam didn't sleep for the next 3 nights. Not truly. His eyes closed from time to time, but his mind never drifted. The apartment had changed its rhythm. Walls creaked in unfamiliar intervals. The pipes no longer hummed predictably, but gave off sudden snaps like bone breaking under pressure. Every time he passed the hallway, he felt watched not directly, but from behind, like someone always lagging 3 steps too close. The toy car on the shelf remained untouched, but now a third object had joined it, a button. Old brass slightly rusted around the edges. He found it in his left shoe, inside his shoe. It hadn't been there the day before. It was cold when he pulled it out, though the room had been warm. He didn't remember ever owning a coat or shirt with brass buttons. On the 4th night, he tried to leave. Packed a bag with only what he needed: phone charger, wallet, the journal, the sketchbook, and made for the door. But as soon as he stepped into the hallway, the lights above him went black. Not dim, gone. The entire corridor stretched ahead like an empty tunnel. Behind him, the apartment door creaked shut on its own. The lock clicked. He turned to grab the knob. It wouldn't turn. He tried again, harder. Nothing. Then softly from the far end of the hall, something moved. Not footsteps this time. Breathing. Labored. Heavy. Close to the floor. Something crawling. Adam stepped back until his shoulder hit the apartment door. The breathing grew louder, wetter, like lungs filled with water. Then a sound like nails on tile scratching forward in small bursts, pausing, then continuing. He never saw what it was. He didn't wait. He banged on the door until it finally gave way, and he stumbled backward into his living room. The lights inside were still on, but flickering now one by one, like a slow countdown. He shut the door and locked every bolt. The hallway remained silent. He didn't try to leave again. That night, he lit a candle in every room. Not because he believed it would help, but because it felt ancient, like something older than electricity might hold off whatever waited in the walls. He sat in the center of the living room with the sketchbook open in front of him, flipping through the pages he had drawn weeks ago, before David had appeared, before the hallway had gone dark. There, between 2 unfinished illustrations of stairwells and broken windows, was a page he didn't remember drawing. A crude outline of a boy lying at the bottom of a staircase, head twisted wrong, arms bent the way arms shouldn't bend, and standing halfway down the stairs was a figure too tall for the drawing scale, with a face smudged out in thick black charcoal. Adam's breath caught. He ran his fingers along the page. The charcoal smeared under his touch. Real. Fresh. From the kitchen, something fell. He stood slowly, heart pounding, and crept forward. The candles cast strange shadows against the cabinets. A glass lay shattered on the tile floor. No sign of what knocked it over, until he looked up. On the fridge door, drawn in thick, wet streaks of condensation, were the words, "You asked. Now, listen." Below it, a fingerprint, small, childlike, like David's, and beneath that, a longer smear dragging downward like a claw. Adam backed out of the kitchen and into the hallway, and there in the corner where David had always appeared, stood the boy once more. His face was clearer now, pale, hollow-eyed, the dent in his skull more sunken, but he was crying silent tears running from only one eye, the other sealed in shadow. Adam couldn't speak. He couldn't ask. He wasn't allowed. But David didn't need questions anymore. He raised a shaking hand and pointed behind Adam. Adam turned slow and terrified. From the bathroom door, cracked open just an inch, came the sound of breathing, not David's. He knew it instantly. Lower, hungrier, and very, very close. Adam didn't move. He stood frozen in the hallway, watching that narrow gap between the bathroom door and the frame where the darkness behind it seemed thicker than any normal shadow. The breathing inside had taken on a rhythm, drawn in slow, exhaled slower, like the lungs behind it weren't human anymore, but something old, practiced in pretending. The crack of the door didn't widen, but Adam could feel the weight of whatever stood behind it. The air near the bathroom had shifted temperature warmer, somehow damper. like the inside of a mouth breathing onto the back of his neck. And behind him, David remained still, arm raised, finger pointing, as if frozen in warning. Adam's legs finally responded, but not to run. Instead, he stepped forward toward the bathroom, each footfall a quiet rebellion against instinct. His body trembled, yet something in him needed to see. Not out of curiosity, not even defiance. It was resignation. Like once you've opened the door, there's only one thing left to do: face what stepped through it. The floor creaked under his heel as he reached out to push the bathroom door. Just as his palm made contact, the breathing stopped. Not like it had fled, like it was listening. Holding still. He pushed the door open in one smooth motion. Inside the bathroom was dark candlelight flickering in through the hallway. No one. Nothing. But the mirror was fogged. Steam clung to the glass in thick patches, and in the center, a handprint too large to be Adam's fingers, long unnaturally spaced. Dripping from the base of it, streaks of condensation had formed a shape. A face. Elongated, crooked, bent sideways as though peering from the mirror's edge. Adam reached for the light switch. The bulb overhead flared, buzzed, then popped. Darkness again, but the mirror reflected more than it should have. Behind him, just for an instant, Adam saw something tall and broken-limbed in the reflection, crouched in the corner of the ceiling, like a spider. Arms too thin. Neck twisted. No face, just folds of skin pulled tight, like someone had erased it. He turned violently, but nothing was there. Only the wall, the candles still flickering, the silence heavy. He backed out of the bathroom, keeping his eyes low. David was gone, the corner empty. Adam didn't sleep. Instead, he pulled every curtain closed, every drawer open. He flipped the mattress, checked behind the fridge, taped shut the vents. Every time he thought of resting, a faint scratch would start on the wall or under the floorboards or somewhere deep in the plumbing, as if the house itself was alive now and restless. He opened the journal again, hoping for something. Anything. More pages had shifted since last time. Notes he didn't write. Sentences that bent down the page like whispers trying to crawl out of the spine. One entry stood out. 3 questions unlock him. 3 nights root him. 3 gifts bind him. Do not ask what cannot be unasked. Adam counted them without needing to think. He had asked his 3 questions. 3 nights had passed with visitations. And now 3 objects, the car, the marble, the button, anchors, each left behind like breadcrumbs or nails. The apartment had become a coffin with the lid nailed shut. He didn't scream. He didn't cry. Instead, he picked up the sketchbook and turned to a blank page. He began to draw not David, but the thing behind him. The crooked limbs, the fingers that scraped the walls, the blank face with no eyes. When he was finished, he turned the sketch around slowly to face the corner where David used to sit, and for the first time in hours, the apartment exhaled. The sketch remained propped on the coffee table, staring into the empty corner like an unspoken dare. Adam hadn't drawn it with skill, he wasn't trying to, but it captured something true. The 2 long limbs, the impossible bend of the spine, the slack where a mouth should be. And something about putting it on paper made the presence in the apartment shift just slightly. Not gone, not even dormant, but seen. Like it knew he had named it in the only way he could. He left it there and didn't touch it again. At 4:12 a.m., the scratching resumed, but this time it was coming from beneath the floorboards directly under the couch. Not scurrying, not like mice. This was deliberate 3 scratches, a pause 3 more. Repeating, like a code. Adam didn't move. He didn't dare. He stared at the red car on the shelf, now slightly tilted as if someone had nudged it. Then from inside the wall by the kitchen sink, the sound of something knocking, not loud, not even forceful, but constant rhythmic, like someone knocking with a forehead instead of a fist. His phone, which had been dead since earlier that day, lit up suddenly on the table. The screen was blank for a moment, then flickered into life with a notification from an app he hadn't opened in months. Motion detected in your living room. The message pulsed, then vanished. A second one followed immediately after motion detected in hallway. He picked it up with numb fingers. The phone was hot to the touch. He opened the camera feed. Static. Then for a split second, an image the hallway. Empty. Then another the corner. But this time, something stood behind the sketch. Something tall enough to cast a shadow across the paper, with fingers curled just behind it, as though about to pick it up. Then the feed cut out. Adam dropped the phone. It struck the floor screen spiderwebbing instantly. A breath sounded behind him, warm and low, as though something had leaned in close lips inches from his ear. But when he turned, nothing. Only the flickering candles, some now burning lower than they should be, as if time passed faster near them. He backed into the kitchen and opened the drawer where he kept a lighter and a roll of twine. He didn't know why, but his hands moved with certainty. He lit a fresh candle and placed it on the bathroom sink. One more on the windowsill. Another in the corner where David used to appear. Then he took the twine and looped it 3 times around the door handle to his bedroom. Tight, not to seal it, just to mark it. 3 loops, 3 questions, 3 gifts. The rules were repeating, or worse, cycling. He tried to sleep, lying on top of the covers, every light in the apartment glowing faintly, but his eyes refused to close, not because of fear, because of sound. A new one this time coming from above, a low creaking from the ceiling, then a whisper spoken in his own voice. "Adam, come look." His name, spoken like a lullaby. The ceiling above his bed rippled just slightly like fabric drawn tight over breath. He watched, paralyzed. Then faintly, a dark stain began to bloom across the plaster. A circle slow and growing. Moisture, no. It didn't drip. It moved like something pressing from the other side. A thumbprint, then another. 5 in all. Something pressing down with its whole hand, as though trying to crawl through the ceiling itself. He couldn't look away. The ceiling bulged, flexed, but never cracked. Then all at once the pressure released, the print vanished, and the air snapped back into silence. The house had tried to open again, and failed. But not for long, because Adam finally understood. It wasn't trying to come in. It was waiting for him to step out. At sunrise, Adam watched the light slide across the floor like a tide that refused to touch the shadows. The corner near the bookshelf remained untouched, soaked in that unnatural dimness, even as golden rays hit the windows. The sketch of the faceless thing still leaned against the table leg, slightly tilted, and beside it, the red toy car was gone. In its place, now placed with careful symmetry, was a single shoelace, frayed, small, child-sized. A 4th object. The rules had shifted. Adam didn't dare touch it. Instead, he stared at it for a long time, his fingers twitching near his knees, resisting the compulsion to arrange, to complete, to accept. He opened the journal again. The handwriting had changed since yesterday. What once looked like his had become more slanted, more urgent, less human. Entire pages were filled now, some in English, others in scribbles he didn't recognize, rows of lines and spirals too precise to be random. Then in the middle of a blank page, a fresh message had appeared. 4 anchors awaken the boy in full. 5 unlock the hall below. 6 open the mouth. His stomach turned. A hall below. There was no basement in this building. He knew every inch of the floor plan. Unless... no, it wasn't literal. Or maybe it was, but not physical. Not in the real world. He thought about the hallway again, the way it darkened unnaturally. The crawling thing, the repeated scratching in threes, the whispers that had started mimicking his voice. He didn't need to check to know what was coming next. A fifth object, and something worse with it. The rules were no longer warnings. They were a countdown. At noon, the apartment door creaked open on its own. Adam had locked it, bolted it, even tied the knob with twine. But now, the twine lay in pieces on the floor, cut not torn. Clean surgical. He stepped closer and peeked into the hallway. The lights were on, but the far end seemed longer than before, stretched like a corridor in a dream. And on the floor at the threshold, as if gently placed there for him to find, was a broken pair of glasses. Not his, child-sized. One lens cracked down the center. He backed away slowly and shut the door. Didn't lock it. What was the point? Instead, he picked up the sketchbook again, flipped to a new page, and began to draw something else. Not the figure this time, but the hallway. The way it warped, grew longer. The sharp line of the door at the end always just barely ajar. He added the glasses, the shoelace, the marble, the button, the toy car. 5. The pen in his hand twitched. Without choosing to, his hand continued drawing. A sixth item began to take form on the paper. A tooth, small white with the faintest trace of red at the root. He dropped the pen, ran to the mirror, checked his mouth, all teeth intact. Then why was his jaw sore? He didn't remember grinding them, didn't remember dreaming either. But when he turned back to the sketch, the tooth was gone from the page, and something was laughing soft childish behind the bathroom door. Adam stood in place, unwilling to glance toward the bathroom door again. That laugh, thin and breathy, still echoed in his ears, though the apartment had returned to its familiar stillness. The kind of stillness that felt forced, like something holding its breath beneath the walls waiting for movement. The laugh hadn't been malicious, not overtly, but it didn't belong. It was joy in the wrong context, the kind of sound you'd expect from a child hiding in the dark, after knocking over a vase, not one haunting the fringes of reality. He gathered the courage to walk toward the bathroom again. Slowly, each step deliberate. The door was open this time. Not wide, but enough to remove the mystery of what lay behind it. Or so he thought. The lights were off. His reflection didn't meet him like it should have. Instead, the mirror was black, not fogged, not shattered, just black. As if the surface had stopped reflecting altogether and had become something else. A screen or a hole. Adam raised a hand and waved it in front of the glass. Nothing came back. No movement, no hand. Then something moved behind the mirror. He couldn't see it clearly, only the suggestion of form. Something low, crawling from the edge of the glass, where shadow bled into shadow. He backed away, slowly. But the blackness seemed to follow him. Not out of the mirror, but in him. Like a shift in pressure behind the eyes, a weight in the bones. He shut the bathroom door. The candle he'd left on the sink had gone out. The fifth object still rested where he left it, the broken glasses. But now on the couch where he'd fallen asleep hours earlier, there was something new. A feather. Gray, oily, slightly curled at the end. At first it looked ordinary, until he realized it wasn't a bird feather. It was too long, too flat, too synthetic. It had been manufactured. He recognized the material. It was insulation from inside the walls, and it was wet. He dropped it instantly, wiped his hand on his shirt, stared at the couch, then heard a tiny click like a switch being flipped. All the candles in the apartment snuffed out at once. The light vanished. He was swallowed whole. And from the kitchen, a sound like something dragging a hand across the tile. Slow, deliberate. Fingernails ticking each groove between the squares. Adam froze. A whisper followed, not in David's voice, not in his own, but in the house's voice. Low, wooden, full of breath and dust. One more gift. Then the door. Then the scraping stopped, and for a moment, there was nothing, until Adam realized the sixth object had been planted already. He felt it inside his pocket. Fingers trembling, he reached in, pulled it out. A tooth, not a child's, an adult molar, still warm, still damp, his own. Adam dropped the tooth as if it had burned him, but it bounced off the floor with a soft clack and came to rest by the toe of his shoe, still glistening faintly, still his. The taste of copper bloomed across his tongue. He pressed a finger to the back of his jaw and winced. A gap. He hadn't even felt it dislodge, hadn't woken to pain. It had just been taken. Like everything else. 6 objects. The number echoed in his head, matching the rule from the journal 6, open the mouth. What did that mean? He didn't want to know, but the house did. It wanted him to hear it, to speak it, to let it in further. The gifts weren't tokens, they were permissions. The apartment groaned, literally, like old timber warping under weight. But there were no storms, no movement above, just the slow stretch of the building itself, as if the place had begun to breathe again, deeper, now fuller. Then came a sudden silence, thick and absolute, swallowing the city noise outside. Not even the distant hum of traffic made it through. Then a sound broke through the void, one Adam hadn't heard since childhood. A doorbell. Not his doorbell. This was a chime. An old-fashioned two-tone chime that belonged in houses built 50 years ago. The kind wired into real wooden walls behind plaster beneath paint that had never known primer. He didn't own such a thing. But the sound had come from inside his apartment. The chime rang again. He followed the sound, slowly drawn toward the far corner of the living room, where a section of the wall bulged slightly, something he hadn't noticed before. A subtle warp in the plaster, barely visible. Then a third chime closer now. The wall flexed, and with the softest click, a square of it opened inward. A door. No knob, no hinges. Just a narrow frame revealing a passage behind the wall. Beyond it, stairs, carpeted in red, dust-coated, descending. And at the top of the stairs, perched like a forgotten toy, was the red car. Only now it rocked back and forth gently. Pushed by something that had already gone ahead, Adam stared into the mouth of the passage. It had been here the entire time. Not metaphor, not hallucination. Below had always existed, and now the house had finished its ritual. 6 anchors, 6 gifts the mouth had opened, and Adam, already hollowed, already marked, had only one thing left to do: go down. The stairwell breathed. It exhaled a stale warmth that curled up Adam's arms, coating his skin in a thin film of damp air that smelled faintly of rust and something older paper left to rot in a flooded basement. He hovered at the threshold, one bare foot on the top step, the other still rooted in the living room. That last sliver of apartment light spilled weakly across the first few carpeted stairs. But beyond that, the red faded into black. Not darkness exactly. Something denser. He didn't know why he stepped in. Not exactly. Maybe because resistance felt hollow now. Maybe because every path led back to this moment, this crooked hallway behind a fake wall, behind a life that had stopped feeling like his. Or maybe it was because David wanted him to. With each step, the temperature dropped, not sharply, but steadily. A descending scale. As he reached the 5th step, the chime rang again, this time behind him. But he didn't look back. He didn't want to know if the wall had closed again. He knew it had. The walls narrowed as he descended. The stairs creaked, not in complaint, but as if announcing his arrival. The air grew thicker, harder to breathe, like inhaling someone else's dreams. 22 steps down the staircase ended in a flat landing with a single door. Steel, no handle. Just a narrow seam down the center like elevator doors that had never opened. Adam reached out. Before he could touch it, the door slid open soundlessly. Behind it, a hallway lit by a row of flickering antique bulbs hanging from exposed wires. The walls were lined with mirrors, tall, dust-covered, mismatched in style and frame. Some were cracked, some warped. None reflected him. He walked. The mirrors did not echo his presence, but they shimmered faintly as he passed, like something behind them moved in time with his steps. On the right, one mirror pulsed with heat. On the left, another seemed to weep, condensation trailing like sweat down its surface. He reached out to wipe one, and for a moment he swore he felt skin on the other side. Cold. Waiting. Then midway through the corridor, a shape appeared ahead. David, standing, not sitting. He was clearer than ever, no longer hazed by shadow or trick of light. His small frame stood still, hands at his sides, the dent in his skull more sunken now, as if time itself had decayed him. His eyes were glassy, unblinking. His mouth, for the first time, was slightly open. A whisper bled from it. Not words, but wind. As though he wasn't speaking to Adam, but through him. Then David turned, walked backward into a mirror, and vanished. But Adam's reflection remained frozen in the glass, staring at him, and it smiled. The smile in the mirror didn't belong to him. It was subtle wrong in the way only something intimately familiar could be. His own eyes stared back, same color, same tired lids. But the corners of the mouth were curled upward, not soft or amused, but deliberate, stretched just past the line of comfort. The kind of grin someone wears when they know something you don't. When they're done waiting, Adam took a step back. So did the reflection. He stepped to the left. It followed, but the smile didn't fade. And then all at once, the light above that particular mirror flickered once, twice, and burst. Glass rained down in silence. The hallway dimmed, shadows creeping longer along the baseboards. The mirror cracked, and the smile stayed. He moved on. Deeper down the hall, the mirrors became narrower, taller, warped with age. They didn't just reflect anymore, they twisted. One showed him walking at a slower pace. Another showed him with a different shirt, as if from yesterday. One near the end showed him missing altogether. Only the hallway, only the light, only... And when he passed that one, he heard footsteps behind him, perfectly in sync. He stopped. So did they. He started walking again, but now each footfall echoed twice, once for him, once for the thing that was no longer a reflection. He reached the end of the corridor where a final mirror stood tallest of them all, framed in rotted wood, so warped it bowed slightly outward. Unlike the others, this one reflected perfectly. No delay, no tricks, just him, and David standing beside him. Adam turned nothing there, turned back to the mirror. David still stood beside him, eyes forward, arms at his sides. And then with a slow motion that betrayed no sound, David raised one finger and pointed again, this time not toward a corner, but toward Adam. Then the mirror began to ripple, not like water, but like breath on thin plastic. David's form wavered, his shape bleeding around the edges, and from somewhere deep behind the glass, a sound began. A low, deliberate knocking, like fists on glass. No, not fists, teeth. The sound was unmistakable now. Wet, deliberate, methodical. Not the sharp knock of knuckles, but the dull, dragging impact of enamel striking glass again and again. It came from deep within the mirror, like something locked behind it had grown impatient, gnawing its way through. Adam stepped back, breath catching. David's figure had vanished, absorbed into the rippling surface. But his finger, his gesture remained etched like a burn in Adam's mind. The mirror flexed inward just slightly as if under pressure. Adam stared his reflection, still perfectly mimicking every breath, every twitch except now his face. His wore that same wrong smile, wide, full of knowing. Then a crack, thin and vertical, splitting the mirror down its center. A second one branched off, running toward the base. The lights above buzzed and dimmed the hallway itself, vibrating faintly under his feet. It felt like being inside a throat just before it swallows. Adam turned and began walking back the way he came. But the hallway had changed. The mirrors no longer showed him. They showed rooms. Each pane became a window into impossible places. A flooded nursery with a rocking crib. A bedroom where something slumped beneath the sheets pulsed as if breathing. A stairwell that coiled downward forever. One mirror showed his apartment, but it was empty. Still, dead. The sketchbook lay open on the couch, its pages fluttering as if caught in a breeze that didn't exist. In the mirror next to that one, the bathroom appeared, its light on the mirror fogged. A handprint began to form on the glass, slow, deliberate, and behind it, David's face emerged, not in shadow this time, but in full light. His eyes were black, not gouged, not shadowed, filled, moving. Adam backed away. The hallway narrowed behind him. The walls groaned again, no longer wooden fleshier, now almost pulsing. He looked for the exit, the stairs, anything familiar. Gone. The mirror at the end, the one that had cracked, was gone too. Replaced now by a door. Small, child-sized, bright red. No handle, no hinges, just wood. He didn't touch it. Not yet. But from behind it something whispered. Not a voice. Not David. Something older. Hungrier. Mouth open. Step through. And then the red door began to bleed. The blood seeped from the seams of the red door, thick and slow like syrup pooling at the base before spreading along the floor in a line that traced directly toward Adam's feet. It wasn't warm. It wasn't cold. It was still as though it had waited too long beneath layers of forgotten time and finally found a reason to rise. Adam didn't step back. Not this time. His instincts had numbed somewhere between the stairwell and the cracking mirror. Fear had changed form. It was no longer a scream in his chest, but a pressure like standing too close to the ocean and knowing it could swallow you without anger or intention. Just indifference. The red door pulsed once, then opened inward. No sound, just darkness inside. But not empty darkness, this was layered, rich, like cloth soaked in ink folding over itself. Something moved within it, not visible but sensed, like the moment before lightning, when the air hums against your skin. Adam stepped forward. The moment his foot crossed the threshold, the mirrors behind him shattered all at once, not into sharp shards, but into dust, fine glittering particles that hovered in the air before dissolving into nothing. The red door stayed open, and within it a hallway identical to the one he had just walked, but smaller, narrower, and dimly lit by a single bulb swinging slowly overhead, casting dizzying shadows. At the end of this corridor stood a crib, a real one now, wooden, old. Its paint peeling at the corners, one leg slightly shorter than the others, causing it to tilt unevenly on the floor. It rocked gently, though nothing touched it. Adam walked. Each step seemed longer than the last, the hallway stretching unnaturally, like a dream where you run, but never reach the end. But finally he stood before the crib, and inside nothing. No baby, no child, just a mirror, small, oval-shaped, resting where a head would be. And in that mirror, his reflection again. Only this time, behind his image stood rows of children, silent, pale, their eyes hollow, their mouths stitched shut with black thread. And in the far back, David, no longer a boy, but something else, taller, stretched, a crown of bent nails circling his head. And he was smiling. Adam stared into the oval mirror, unable to blink. The figures behind his reflection didn't move, didn't breathe, but they were not still in the way. A photograph is still. They waited. The children, row upon row, lined the depths of the mirror's impossible space like statues carved from wax skin, too smooth features to exact. The thread sewn through their lips glistened as if wet. One girl's eyes followed him subtly, the whites slightly off, unfocused, like those of a doll. And at the center of them, all David. His form stretched unnaturally tall, limbs long and thin, draped in a shadow that moved with a life of its own. The bent nails that circled his head were not fixed in any material way. They floated, spinning slowly, whispering softly in a language Adam felt in his teeth. The crib creaked, not from the mirror, from the real world beneath his hands. He stepped back. The mirror's surface began to ripple again, but unlike the last time, it did not stop. It grew softer liquid, A thick black fluid bubbled up from the edges, swallowing the image, until the entire pane became a black pool, reflecting only the dim light above. Then the crib began to fold inward. The wood moaned, the slats bent, not as if breaking, but curling, like a trap, like a mouth. Adam stumbled backward as the crib collapsed into itself, forming a round shape on the floor, an open pit. The mirror, now a surface, stretched across it like oil. And from within, something rose, a hand, small, childlike, but swollen, waterlogged. The skin split as it moved, revealing muscle beneath pulsing gently. Then a second hand clutching the edge of the crib-turned threshold. Then the top of a head, matted hair, the skull dented. David, but not David. A version that had spent too long below. A version left rotting and ignored. His eyes met Adam's, not wide and pleading now, but steady. Knowing. "Thank you," the creature whispered in a voice that scraped across Adam's spine like broken teeth on porcelain. It began pulling itself through the mirror hole with wet sucking sounds, flesh separating from bone, reattaching with each inch it gained. The floor beneath Adam's feet pulsed. The crib frame splintered outward, forming a circle of jagged teeth. The mouth was here, and it was no longer metaphor. It had opened, and Adam had fed it. The thing that wore David's shape dragged itself fully into the room joints, bending the wrong way, skin sagging in places where time had forgotten to hold it together. Its hands were wrong fingers, slightly too long, too fluid in motion, like underwater snakes. It stood upright, finally wobbling once before locking its gaze on Adam. No menace in its expression, only inevitability. "You brought the sixth," it said calmly, voice thin and distant as if spoken through a wall of fog. "Now the mouth will stay open." Adam stepped back, breath tight, the world around him warping at the edges. The walls no longer straightened into corners. They curved inward like the inside of a rib cage. Light overhead flickered in a rhythm that matched his heartbeat. "I didn't ask for this," he whispered, but his voice barely left his throat. The creature tilted its head. "You accepted the gifts. You kept them. That is all it ever needed." Behind the thing, the dark pit where the mirror once lay gurgled softly, a thick exhale rising from its depths. Something massive shifted just below the surface he couldn't see. He'd only feel it like the pull of an undertow. "What happens now?" he asked. The creature smiled with David's lips. "You choose. You stay, or you make room." A second figure began to rise from the pit, smaller, twitching. Then another, pale hands, small feet. The silent children from the mirror, each climbing upward one by one, their mouths still sewn black threads pulled taut like stitched fabric. They gathered behind David's shape, motionless, forming a crescent arc across the warped room. Adam looked down and saw the sixth object again, the molar now pulsing faintly with light. And he knew. One last act. A seventh gift. Not a found item this time. A given one. A sacrifice. The mouth didn't want things, it wanted stories, endings, closures. And someone had to stay and keep the story going. Adam's eyes blurred. His hands opened slowly. "I understand," he whispered. And David, whatever David had become, nodded. The mouth waited. The children stood perfectly still behind the thing that had once been David. Their hollow eyes locked on Adam. They didn't sway, didn't blink. They waited not for salvation, not for mercy, but for permission. Adam took a slow breath, but the air no longer filled his lungs the same way. It tasted old, heavy, like something exhaled long ago and trapped beneath the floorboards. He looked around the space, trying to find a piece of the world he'd known before the candlelight, the journal, the safe hum of his fan. All gone. Even the red door behind him had sealed shut, replaced by a smooth, pulsing wall of flesh-colored plaster. The only way forward was down. David, or what remained of him, stepped aside, and the pit called louder. It didn't roar or groan. It beckoned gently with the sound of breathing and sleep. Not peaceful sleep, but the kind twisted by dreams too thick to escape. Adam felt the weight of the sixth gift in his pocket again, the molar humming like a living thing. He pulled it out. It was no longer his tooth. It pulsed red and blue, veined like an organ still warm. When he let it fall, it didn't hit the ground. It floated, then slowly descended toward the pit, offered and accepted. The lights above blinked once, then again, then all at once. Darkness, and then faint golden light began to seep from the pit's edges. The floor quaked, not violently, but in recognition. The seventh gift was choice, and the house had waited long enough. From the black, a single object rose, hovering inches above the pit's surface. A chair, wooden, child-sized, cracked at one leg. Adam understood instantly. One had to sit, one had to stay, to watch, to witness, to remember. He looked at David. The boy's form shimmered slightly less decayed now, eyes almost human again. He blinked once, slowly. And in that gesture, Adam saw it clearly. This wasn't punishment. It was inheritance. He stepped toward the chair, and the children behind David breathed in all at once. The chair was impossibly still, suspended above the pit. By nothing Adam could see, no strings, no support, just air thick with expectation. As he stepped closer, the floor beneath him gave a subtle sigh, the kind a bed makes when you lower yourself into it at the end of a long day. The children's inhale had faded into silence again, but their eyes never left him. They were the audience, not captives. This was not a room of victims. It was a room of inheritance, of ritual. Adam reached the edge of the pit. The chair hovered inches away, just beyond reach, waiting for that final motion. The creature beside him, the thing that had once been David, watched with calm reverence its form, less monstrous now, as if Adam's choice had smoothed the edges of whatever it had become. There was no smile anymore, no warning, only quiet. He took the last step. The chair lowered gently, as if responding to him alone, and settled solidly on the floor, now flush with the room. The pit sealed around its legs like skin closing over a wound. Adam sat, and everything stopped. The air, the hum, even the distant pulsing presence below the floor went still, like the house had exhaled its final breath. For a moment there was only the faint sound of Adam's heartbeat. Then the room shifted, not physically but in perspective. The mirrors reappeared across the walls, but this time they showed not memories, not warped reflections, but others. Rooms in other buildings, apartments, bedrooms, a woman brushing her teeth, a man pacing a hallway in the middle of the night, a child crying under covers. They were real, alive, unaware. But every mirror contained one thing in common, a shadow in the corner, sometimes subtle, sometimes close, always watching. Adam tried to stand, but he couldn't, not because something held him, because he no longer wanted to. He understood his purpose now. He was part of it. The seventh gift wasn't sacrifice, it was stewardship. And in the center mirror, his old apartment, the sketchbook lay closed on the floor. The window had blown open, and in the corner of the room, a new shadow waited. Adam watched from the chair as the new shadow stretched slowly along the wall of his former apartment. It didn't move with urgency. It flowed like ink, bleeding into paper. The room was dimly lit, the curtains swaying gently in the breeze, but no air reached the floor. The shadow coiled itself into the same corner David once occupied, patient, unshaped, not yet seen. It had not chosen a face yet. On the other side of the mirror, someone had entered. A man, early 30s, by the look of him, new tenant. Tired eyes, armful of boxes, earbuds in. He didn't look at the corner. Few ever did. The mirror shimmered faintly, and Adam felt a pull in his chest like a whisper pressing against his ribs. It wasn't in words, not exactly. It was remembrance, the knowing of what came next. Behind Adam, the children remained in their quiet formation. no longer staring at him, but at the mirrors, watching, waiting. David stood closest to the pit now, his head tilted, his arms folded gently behind his back. He wasn't monstrous anymore. The decay had receded, and in its place was something worse peace. The man in the apartment laughed at something on his phone, unaware of the curtain brushing against his shoulder. He placed the sketchbook, Adam's old one, on the coffee table, flipping through its pages idly. A red crayon mark remained on the inside cover, half smudged. The shadow pulsed. Adam could feel it forming a face. A story, because that was what the house wanted. Not terror, not blood, continuity, and he was its keeper now. Each mirror lit with new rooms, new names, new beginnings. And Adam, once the haunted, had become the lighthouse. The chair beneath him pulsed once, warm, final. He no longer remembered the sound of the city outside. No longer remembered the day he moved in. Only the corners. Only the gifts. And the boy who smiled. The mirrors pulsed in steady rhythm now, like slow, synchronized heartbeats echoing through a body made of rooms and corners. Adam sat unmoving, not out of fear or paralysis, but because the chair had become part of him, and he part of the house. His body no longer itched with resistance. His mind no longer thrashed for answers. The story had closed its circle around him, and now it spiraled outward. The new tenant in the apartment. Matt, that was his name, tossed a half-empty box onto the couch and sank down beside it. His phone buzzed against his thigh. He didn't answer. His eyes lingered on the sketchbook. He hadn't brought it. It had simply been there. A leftover maybe from the previous tenant. Or so he assumed. The page lay open to a crude drawing of a boy sitting in a corner, stick limbs, one eye scribbled out, the other staring straight ahead. Matt blinked. Something about the angle of the lines unsettled him, like the sketch had been drawn from memory that wasn't his. In the mirror, Adam watched him. Not like a voyeur, but like a caretaker watching a candle flicker too close to the edge of its wax. The air behind Matt shifted barely, a faint displacement. The shadow had taken root now, just as it had with Adam. Not aggressive, not loud. It would wait. It always waited. That was the rule. From the pit beneath Adam's chair, threads began to unspool, thin black, nearly invisible. But he felt them. They drifted across the floor like strands of smoke, crawling up the legs of each watching child, connecting them to the mirrors. David watched too, but with no expression. He had passed through his story already. The others still waited for theirs. The apartment's lights flickered once. Just once. Enough to make Matt glance up, frown, then shake his head and return to unpacking. But the camera feed in the mirror lingered. Adam leaned closer. On the wall behind Matt, something faint had appeared, marks thin and crescent-shaped arcing above the baseboard. Fingernail marks, scraped shallow as though from something small, or someone sitting too long, or being watched too often. Matt paused, turned, looked. Nothing. The marks were gone. In the chair, Adam exhaled. This was the beginning. Again. And he would watch it unfold 100 times 1,000, with every tenant who passed through every child, who glanced at the wrong mirror, every sketch left behind, by accident or design, because this house was not bound by wood and stone. It was built from stories. And as long as someone sat in the chair, the stories would never stop. Behind Adam, a new child stepped forward from the line drawn to a mirror that had just lit with the image of a motel room in Nebraska. The shadow was already there. Adam nodded once. Let the stories begin. The thread binding Adam to the chair had dissolved into him now, indistinguishable from muscle and marrow. He no longer remembered how it felt to stand. There was no need. The mirrors were his limbs now, his reach extending into bedrooms, basements, hospitals, libraries, each a window into another story, another soul brushing unknowingly against the threshold. The children moved quietly behind him, their ranks no longer rigid, but flowing like currents around stone. Each one watched a different mirror, their stitched mouths never parting, but Adam could feel their thoughts, soft impressions, like breath on glass. In one mirror, a child sleeping in the backseat of a car, the interior lit only by the glow of passing highway signs. The shadow huddled just outside the edge of the back window, unnoticed. In another, a man in a retirement home, staring blankly at the corner of his room, where the wallpaper peeled in the shape of a face. And in another, a group of teenagers in a wooded cabin, one of them sketching furiously, trying to capture a memory none of them could explain, of a boy in the corner of their dreams. The stories were spinning faster now. Adam could feel them weaving through time like veins through skin. They bled into each other, not in chaos, but in pattern. He leaned forward. The mirror showing Matt's apartment had grown dimmer, the light flickering in odd syncopation shadows pooling near the heater. Matt stood over the sketchbook, a new page open. He had begun to draw without meaning to. A crude outline of a door. Red. No handle. His hand moved, automatically pulled by a thread he couldn't see. The pencil traced the shape over and over again, pressing deeper each time. Adam recognized the rhythm. It was the call, the same one that had reached him, the same that had reached David, a beckoning gentle and constant like a dream you couldn't fully wake from. In the corner of Matt's apartment, the shadow began to solidify. Slowly, patiently. It didn't need to rush. It never did. Behind Adam, the children turned in unison. Another mirror lit. Another thread extended, this one pulsing softly with blue light. He felt it enter the house like a footstep on hollow wood. Far away in a small town, a girl sat cross-legged in her bedroom, staring at her closet with wide eyes. The closet door was open. She didn't remember opening it, but inside she could see a corner, and in that corner, a shape was crouched, watching her with its head tilted too far to the side. She would not sleep tonight. The story had already begun. Adam reached out not with hands, but with the quiet gravity of his new purpose. The threads responded, tightening slightly, ensuring nothing frayed, no ending unraveled. He was not their jailer. He was their archivist. The house breathed once more, and through the soft hum of mirrors and motion, Adam heard it again, a single delicate voice echoing from the deep. Not David's, another, new, a boy's voice whispering from a corner not yet discovered. "Are you watching me?" Yes, Adam thought. I always am. The boy's voice lingered like a ripple in still water, delicate but unshakable. Adam didn't know his name yet, but that no longer mattered. The names came later after the stories bloomed. What mattered now was the thread freshly spun golden at the edges, tethering the boy's bedroom to the house, to Adam, to the mirrors that lined the silent cathedral of watchers behind him. The children turned in slow unison, their hollow eyes reflecting the boy's room as if they too had known that closet, that corner, that familiar shape that always seems to shift when the lights go out. The new mirror pulsed softly. Within it, the boy sat rigid on his bed blankets drawn to his chest, flashlight trembling in his grip. The closet remained open, its edges lost in the gloom. From within, a soft creak, not menacing, almost hesitant. The boy leaned forward, peering into the darkness, eyes wide but dry. He hadn't learned to cry about it yet. That would come later, after the visits, after the dreams began to echo in waking hours. Adam could feel the story's outline forming. A whisper of loneliness in a 2-story home. A father who worked nights. A mother who left long before. A door never fully shut. It wasn't sadness that invited the house in, it was unwatched silence. That was where the corners grew deep. That was where the shadows found space to stretch. Adam's fingers, or what remained of their memory, twitched against the arms of the chair. The boy was close, closer than most. His presence felt like static, just before a storm, as though his part in the story had already been half written, as if he were born at the edge of one mirror and was just now returning. Behind Adam, the chair shifted not under him but around him. Wood bent with quiet reverence. Not decay, not corruption, growth. As if the house itself was reshaping to hold him more fully, to root him deeper into its spine. The children stood still, but their forms shimmered faintly like mist, barely clinging to shape. They weren't fading. They were changing. The longer they stood, the more they resembled pieces of memory than people. Not tragic, just inevitable. Adam leaned forward. In the mirror, the boy took a cautious step toward the closet. His flashlight flickered. The shape in the corner moved, but only slightly enough to let him know he wasn't mistaken. There would be no scream, no crashing of doors. The house didn't frighten. It invited. The boy paused at the threshold. "Is someone there?" he asked the dark, but his voice barely carried beyond the bedroom walls. Adam answered silently, his awareness sliding through the mirror like breath fogging a window. "Yes, I see you." The shadow shifted once more. The corner thickened. The story deepened. This was how it always began, not with terror, but with recognition. And Adam, its keeper, its witness, waited to see what would be offered next. The boy stood at the closet's edge, his bare feet sinking slightly into the carpet, as if the floor itself had grown softer beneath him, more yielding, like something just beneath the fabric exhaled when he stepped. The flashlight in his hand buzzed with low static, the beam narrowing, pulling his gaze deeper into the dark. The corner inside wasn't just shadow anymore. It had depth, a wrongness of space that hinted at something much larger than the small wooden frame could possibly hold. Something folded in on itself like paper creased too many times. Adam watched from his chair, the thread now firmly rooted golden light bleeding from the mirror's edges into the floor beneath him. The boy's story had taken hold, and with it, so had the weight of what came next. These were the moments the house treasured most. Not the screams, not the fleeing, but the hesitation, the single heartbeat between choice and consequence. The silence of breath held at the edge of understanding. Behind Adam, the children shifted again, one small figure taking a half step forward. Her mirror glowed faintly, reflecting a kitchen somewhere in Oregon, a mother whispering a story to a baby no longer sleeping. Another child moved beside her, then another. The house was awakening on all fronts, and Adam could feel the stories thickening, winding together like braided roots around a single unseen core. In the boys' room, the closet darkened, not by absence of light, but by presence of something else. Something ancient and slow and watching. The boy squinted, lowering the flashlight. "You're not real," he muttered, but not with confidence. More like a question, a hope, and then movement. Not violent, not sharp, just a gradual unfurling of form. A silhouette kneeling in the corner, arms long folded awkwardly, like they had forgotten what elbows were for. The shape of a head tilted once too far, then held there waiting. The boy dropped the flashlight. He didn't run. He should have, but he didn't. Instead, he whispered, "Are you David?" Adam's breath caught a memory flickering behind his eyes. That name, once full of weight and sorrow, no longer stung. It had become a seed, a pattern, the first ripple in a still pond. But this wasn't David, not exactly. This was what followed, what evolved from the imprint David had left behind. The corners never recycled. They adapted. The shape in the closet reached out, one arm impossibly slow, not demanding, inviting. The boy took a step back, then paused. "I know you," he said. And Adam felt the house lean in, because that was it, the recognition, the echo, that strange, impossible familiarity that always preceded the thread, pulling tight. The story was no longer a beginning. It was a return. In the mirror, The closet opened wider, not physically, but conceptually. Its frame no longer ended at the bedroom wall. The space extended through, folding inward toward the pit beneath Adam's chair, connecting through corridors only the house could walk. The boy was no longer on the outside. He had entered the story, and Adam, the watcher, the keeper, the once haunted, whispered without sound, "Welcome back." The wordless whisper hung in the stillness like mist seeping through every crack of the house's being. Welcome back. Not a greeting in the ordinary sense, but a recognition, an acknowledgement that the boy was not simply chosen by the house. He had been remembered. In Adam's chair, the pulse of the house beat through his bones like a second heartbeat. The boy had crossed the unseen line, not with ceremony, not with violence, but with acceptance, with belief. In the mirror, the flashlight rolled on the carpet, its beam slicing sideways across the boy's feet as he stood frozen but unafraid. The figure in the corner no longer hid. It crouched, low elbows, sharp legs twisted as though bent backwards at the knees' eyes, if they were eyes, glimmering dully in the gloom. It didn't move. It only waited, offering nothing but presence. The boy swallowed hard. "If I sit with you," he whispered, "will you leave me alone?" Adam leaned closer. The shape in the closet tilted its head. Not no, not yes, choice. And something in the house shifted. In response to that question, walls creaked softly in other mirrors. Objects trembled slightly on tabletops miles away. The house wasn't a creature of chaos. It thrived on decisions. On the precise instant when fear met surrender. The children behind Adam turned toward the boy's mirror. Even David ever still blinked once. Slowly, a show of reverence, the boy crouched slowly, one knee pressing into the carpet, and lowered himself to sit mirroring the shape in the dark. They faced each other silent. The space between them pulsed once. A thread formed, not spun from Adam, but directly from the boy, silver gray, frayed at the edges, fragile, unclaimed, a potential. Adam's chair responded immediately, wood humming under him, the mirrors glowing slightly brighter. This was rare, a direct thread, one that bypassed the keeper. The boy was not just a visitor, he was a mirror. Some stories passed through, some stayed. But once in a great while, the house found one that reflected it, and when it did, it grew. Adam could feel it beneath him now, shifting stone, stretching bone, the house expanding quietly, like lungs inhaling. New hallways began to form. New doors etched themselves into brick that hadn't existed moments before. Not for escape, for space. The shape in the closet reached forward again. One hand, not to grasp, to offer. The boy stared, his eyes wide, his breath shallow, but he didn't flinch. Slowly, he raised his own hand, and their fingers met. No sound, no scream, just a stillness so deep it felt like the earth had paused. Adam closed his eyes. The mirror glowed silver. The thread snapped tight, and the house remembered. The moment the boy's fingers touched the figure's hand, time inside the mirror didn't stop it, contracted. The closet folded inward, not collapsing, but spiraling walls stretching like shadows at dusk corners deepening beyond logic. Light bent color washed out, and silence became a roar so dense it was felt rather than heard. Adam saw it all, not with eyes, but with the kind of awareness that came from being stitched into the house's design. This wasn't possession. It wasn't abduction. This was recognition between two reflections of the same wound. The boy had offered trust, and the house had accepted the offering. The thread linking them pulsed, now thickened and luminous, no longer fragile. A bond formed through mirrored fear. In the reflection, the boy blinked slowly, as if slipping into sleep, though his posture hadn't changed. The thing opposite him, the once shadow, now shape, shifted closer, its face still unfinished, flickering between features, a child's jawline, then a hollow socket, then nothing at all. It didn't need to choose a face. The boy had already chosen to see himself. That was always the deepest hook. Not terror from outside, but recognition from within. The mirror pulsed once more. Then the image cracked, not shattered, but fractured into concentric rings as if the glass were rippling. The room beyond remained intact, but something had changed. The boy was still seated in front of the closet, but now his surroundings mirrored Adam's. The walls were subtly older, the light dimmer. Dust hung in the air like memory. And behind the boy, just barely visible in the corner of the frame, was the chair. Another chair. Adam sat forward, a new seat, not a replacement, an extension. The house had made space, not just for a new story, but for a new keeper. The mirrors flickered. The children behind Adam stood straighter. Some turned toward the new image, some did not, but all of them felt it. This had happened only once before long ago when Adam had been the boy. And now, as the house had done then, it opened a door not visible to the eye, but felt deep in the spine. A corridor stretched from Adam's own seat to the boy's mirror, lined with countless doors, each pulsing with memory, each vibrating with the hum of the unspoken. This boy would not be claimed by the corner. He would become part of it. And Adam, he did not feel fear or sorrow or jealousy. He felt relief, not because he would leave, but because for the first time, he would not sit alone. The mirrors grew warmer, the shadows deeper, and in the closet, the boy closed his eyes and listened. The boy sat motionless, eyes closed, body softened into the posture of someone who had surrendered not out of fear, but understanding. The shape in the closet no longer held form. It melted into the dark behind him like ink returning to paper. And yet the presence remained an invisible weight, a low thrum that filled the space, not with menace, but meaning. Around him the room had subtly warped. The angles of the walls had bent in ways that logic wouldn't question unless one stared too long. The air itself tasted older. From his own chair, Adam could feel the second seat forming, solidifying through the mirror, not as reflection, but as echo. It didn't mimic his chair exactly. The grain of the wood was different, the arms narrower, the back taller shaped, less like a throne and more like a cradle. The house was making this one with care, sculpting it to the boy's thread, not Adam's. This was a new keeper, shaped not by David's shadow, but by his own. The corridor that connected them wasn't physical, not in the way hallways are walked. It was lined with stories, some told, some half-written, others still waiting. Adam sensed their voices murmuring along the walls like wind moving through teeth. Each door they passed shimmered with a different tone. One whispered with laughter followed by silence. Another sobbed without breath. Another simply waited locked from the inside. The boy opened his eyes. He did not speak. He did not scream. He knew now. The mirrors behind Adam responded instantly, glowing not in unison, but rhythm, like lanterns catching a pulse. One by one the children turned. Their stitched mouths remained closed, but their heads bowed slightly toward the boy's image. A new keeper had never been welcomed like this. Perhaps because the boy had not entered in fear. Perhaps because the shadow hadn't needed to take him, he had arrived. And the house responded with reverence. The shape in the boy's closet faded entirely, leaving the space behind him empty, but somehow fuller. A black rectangle. Yes, but one humming with invitation. The boy turned his head slightly, not to look at it, but to acknowledge its continued presence. Then slowly, he stood. The thread connecting Adam to the boy was no longer a single filament. It had grown into a thick rope of silver and dark red, like old blood wound with moonlight. And as the boy crossed the threshold of his closet, stepping not into clothes and shoeboxes, but into the corridor between chairs. Adam felt the shift, not as loss, but balance. The second chair awaited, empty only for a moment. Behind Adam, the children parted, forming an aisle. In the mirrors, other figures stirred. People in other rooms sensing a change without knowing why. And Adam, who had watched for so long, who had kept the mirrors in motion and the threads from fraying, finally exhaled. The boy had come home, and the house had grown. The boy stepped forward into the corridor, and the light bent gently around him. Not harshly, not in judgment, but as if the house itself was adjusting to his presence like a great organism shifting weight to welcome a new limb. His steps were soundless, yet each one echoed in Adam's chest like a soft knock from behind a closed door. He moved with the quiet certainty of someone who wasn't being led, but drawn, as if something long dormant inside him had recognized this path as one he'd always known. Not a stranger in a strange place, but a forgotten resident returning by instinct alone. The corridor did not lengthen as he moved. It did not stretch or distort. Instead, it revealed itself precisely as he needed it, door by door, shadow by shadow. Some remained closed, others opened slightly, offering glimpses of rooms full of breathless waiting. Some rooms flickered with laughter, some were dim with sorrow, and a few glowed with nothing but stillness, as though they were simply listening. The boy didn't pause. He did not need to. Ahead, the chair waited. It had finished forming, not in pieces, but all at once, as if the house had known all along what it needed to become. It was not ornate. It didn't tower. It curved inward with arms that wrapped more than they rested, and its surface was marked by the same spiral patterns that had once covered David's walls, then Adam's dreams. But these spirals didn't confuse or repel. They hummed with warmth. The boy reached it, paused, then turned not back, but sideways, toward Adam. Through the corridor's impossible geometry, Adam saw him clearly. Their eyes met, not across space, but across memory, across story. Adam did not speak, but the boy nodded once. A gesture not of obedience, but of understanding. Then he sat, not heavily, not with fear, but with the quiet grace of someone who had chosen. And the house responded. The walls of the corridor flexed like lungs taking a breath. The mirrors behind Adam didn't brighten, they aligned. Their reflections shifted in subtle harmony, now no longer fragmented or isolated, but part of a larger image that had always been there, only waiting for the second half to arrive. The children stepped back into place. Their heads turned not only to Adam, but to the boy as well. He had no name here. He didn't need one. He was not a copy. He was not a replacement. He was a parallel thread. And together, they formed the spine of something far more enduring than fear. In some distant mirror, a woman stirred in sleep, sensing peace in her nightmare. In another, a young man shut a closet door, and for the first time it stayed shut. The house was no longer waiting. It had arrived. Adam leaned back, not to retreat, but to rest. The boy did the same. And between them, the hum of stories yet to come thrummed quietly, like pages rustling in a breeze no one could feel. The mirrors watched, the walls remembered, and the corners, once deep and dark and hungry, were now simply full. And now, as the story softens and the corners of your room return to ordinary shadows, let your breath slow. Whatever followed you into this quiet moment, doubt, noise, the echo of something unspoken, let it remain here, held safely within the story's frame. The house we walked through tonight wasn't built with brick or wood. It was memory. It was fear made gentle. It was wonder turned inward. And maybe somewhere deep down, you recognized it not because it was haunted, but because it was familiar. You followed threads tonight, some loose, some tight. Some mirrored your own thoughts more than you realized. That's the quiet magic of stories like these. They stretch past fear and into reflection, into softness, into rest. So now as your eyes grow heavier and the quiet deepens, know this: the house doesn't follow. It stays where it belongs, in memory and fiction, in the silence between heartbeats. You are safe. You are here. And the story has ended. But the dreams, they're yours now. So drift gently with the hum of mirrors behind you and the warmth of watchers at your side. You are not alone. You never were.